Let's go back to the 1940s, when America's backyard soil became a front line in the fight, not with guns, but with seeds. The Victory Garden was more than just a patch of dirt. It was a patch of hope. With ration books clipping coupons for sugar and meat, families turned to tomatoes, beans, and cucumbers bursting fresh from their own earth. Moms in aprons, often rolled up sleeves stained with soil, turned the backyard into a tiny farmstead. Kids had their hands in the dirt, learning to spot a bug that might eat a precious bean leaf, or how to water just right, not too much to drown the roots. The air smelled sweet and earthy, a mix of tilled soil and new green growth, while the summer sun warmed the backs of every eager gardener. Victory gardens popped up everywhere, from urban rooftops to tiny window boxes on apartment ledges, each sprout a quiet rebellion against rationing's cruel grip. The family calendar often revolved around the garden's rhythms: peas to pick at dawn, tomatoes ripening by afternoon, beans curling skyward as if to salute the flag. Neighbors swapped seeds or gardening tips, sharing the bounty in spirited solidarity. Even the kitchen buzzed with garden energy. Freshly plucked veggies rushed onto the stove to become stews and salads that tasted of freedom and togetherness. Victory gardens reminded everyone that while the world raged outside, renewal thrived in the smallest green corners of home. And as those gardens grew, green shoots snapping defiantly against the backdrop of war, the promise of peace felt a little closer. Next came the hum of raiders and families gathering round, eager for war updates, and the next shared ritual. You hold it like a small, secret ledger, the ration book, pocket-sized and worn, its pages peppered with carefully punched stamps, each little stamp a promise and a limit. 2 ounces of butter this week, a pound of sugar, a ration of petrol barely enough for the week's errands. The heft of it in your hand is oddly comforting but urgent, a countdown measured in coupons rather than seconds. Every household carried one, a stark symbol of wartime scarcity and the shared sacrifice across Britain's kitchens and streets. Stepping into the grocer's shop, the bell overhead jingled, an everyday herald of a weekly ritual. Your mother slid forward the blue-gray book, open to reveal a mosaic of coupons, precious bits of paper adorned with serial numbers and official stamps, marked carefully by the shopkeeper's punch. Each perforation meant one less sweet spoonful, one rationed cut of meat. Commodities suddenly turned precious treasures. The lines of neighbors chatting patiently, waiting their turn, were punctuated by the soft thuds of coupons clipped and the sniff of powdered milk and wrapped sausages. The ration book wasn't just economics, it was family care folded into policy. Planning dinners meant counting coupons as solemnly as coins, substituting and stretching. Recipes were reinvented to tame the limits imposed from above, stews stretched with root vegetables, marmalades made thick with bits of rationed fruit, and Sunday roast traded for stewed rabbit or less meat. The crunch of the puncher was the clock ticking closer to the next ration day, when the book could be stamped anew. And beneath it all, the ration book created a quiet intimacy with scarcity, a reminder that while the world was at war, your home was a careful negotiation of daily needs. This small booklet was the key to a rationed life, measured, modest, but never defeated. Next week, you'd visit the pump with your coupons and the lingering smell of fuel in the air, racing the meter down to your allotted pints. The moment Sunday morning moved into afternoon, the unmistakable roar of the Hoover vacuum would emerge from the hallway closet. That heavy beast, all polished metal casing and thick black cords, was less a cleaning tool than a family member. Its sound, the soundtrack to Mom's cleaning hour. You could almost set your watch by it. The vacuum would start humming just as church services wound down, filling the house with a steady drone that meant only one thing. Rug shining, dust beating war was on. No flimsy plastic here. This was pure industrial strength designed to roar through decades with fearless grit. The metal body felt cold beneath your hands, weighty and loud, pushing forward on those thick rubber wheels. Every pull and push pulled an invisible thread of dust from the deepest carpet fibers, leaving an invisible trail of victory behind. The smell that followed wasn't just clean, it was triumph, slightly metallic, warm rubber against the backdrop of freshly disturbed upholstery. Mom's stern expression softened only when the vacuum's job was nearly done, a quiet pride shimmering beneath her no-nonsense routine. You learned fast, no skipping spots, no half-hearted passes. It was ritual, discipline, and love all rolled into one noisy, rattling machine. If you're lucky, you might get to wield the handle yourself, apply the pressure, navigate the heavy beast around the table legs, evict every crumb under the couch. That moment, hands gripping the polished metal like a pilot's controls, was a small taste of control in an otherwise chore-heavy day. And when the hum finally died down and the thumping stopped, the silence that followed was almost sacred. You could almost hear the carpet sighing in relief, pristine and proud beneath your feet. But of course, the Sunday ritual would return, and with it, the unstoppable Hoover, ready to remind you all over again that cleaning was serious business. The clatter of rivet guns fades into a quieter, humbler sound, the soft snip of scissors and the gentle zip of needles threading through fabric. The women who powered factories by day gathered in the evening, swapping not just tips on operating wartime machinery, but secrets for mending the wear of their uniforms. Patches of navy blue or dusty olive green, stitched with determination, marked each one's story. A little hole here from a busy shift, a snag there from hurried repairs. Under harsh lighting, with the smell of oil and sweat lingering on their hands, the Rosies formed a sewing circle that was more than a practical fix. They shared how to stretch fabric carefully, turning threads pliant without snapping during clothing shortages. "Make those seams last," a voice would say. "This dress might be the only one you get for months." Their fingers moved quickly, weaving resilience into every hem, every patch, every mended tear. Laughter popped up between the measured stitches. Someone brought a scrap of rumored candy. Another showed off a clever knot to keep buttons in place when thread ran thin. Fabric scraps passed around like treasures were tucked into pockets for later. A reminder that even in rationing, creativity and sisterhood thrived. The sewing circle became a refuge where worries morphed into collective strength, and stories of the day's labor turned into cheerful banter. In these circles, the Rosie spirit wasn't just about rivets and assembly lines. It was about pulling together string by thread to weather war's demands. By sharing needles, knowledge, and comfort, these women patched more than uniforms. They mended community, one stitch at a time. From sewing needles, the scene shifts seamlessly to the clink of ration tokens jangling in pockets. You can still hear the distant wail of the school bell, but there's a sudden hush, an unusual tension crackling through the air. The teacher's voice, steady but firm, announces the air raid drill. Your classroom shifts from lively chaos to quiet obedience in seconds. Chairs scrape softly as the kids shuffle. No running, no loud whispers, just a slow migration toward those designated safe spots. Behind desks, crouching low, you nestle like a small soldier, the wooden surface rough against your palms. Outside, the playground, usually a riot of laughter and games, feels worlds away. Inside, the drill blurs the line between the imagined and the real, an invisible danger lurking just beyond those classroom walls. Though the whistles and alarms are only practice, your heart beats faster, caught between the curiosity of youth and the weight of grown-up fears whispered on the radio not long before. You glance sideways at your classmates, faces pale but resolute, eyes wide with a mix of confusion and growing understanding. The teacher moves along the rows, her expression serious but kind, whispering a few calming words, reminding everyone it's only a drill. Yet, as you sit still, the echo of distant sirens and the fading thud of pumped-up hearts cast a somber shadow over recessed stories and jokes still eager to be shared. This strange routine, repeated in schools across towns, folded a sobering thread into the fabric of everyday childhood. Quiet moments, punctuated by imagined air raids, shaping the way your generation learned to face the unknown. Soon, the signal ends, and you rise, stretching legs stiff from crouching, stepping back into a playground, now seemingly lighter, yet forever marked by the memory of silence and alertness. Next up, the comforting jingle of an ice cream truck rolling slowly down the neighborhood street. The gymnasium lights were always just a little too dim, casting long shadows across the smooth linoleum floor. You could hear the clack of penny loafers and the swish of bobby socks as the jitterbug spun wildly to the booming beat of the jukebox in the corner. That metal box was a teenage oracle, calling out hits from Elvis to Buddy Holly, each selection dropping dimes from your clenched fist into its slot with a satisfying clink. After long afternoons hauling papers door to door, your handful of coins wasn't just currency. It was your ticket to the night. The air smelled sweet, part milkshake vanilla, part warmed-up linoleum, part anticipation. At the soda fountain, kids crowded close, balancing tall glasses of frothy chocolate or strawberry malts while nervously offering sticky hands to dance partners. The simplicity was pure magic. A beat, a dance, a glance exchanged beneath the blinking no loitering sign that nobody really seemed to obey. You'd pull at the collar of your Letterman jacket, heart pounding as the choir boy group crooned from the speakers, and your date's poodle skirt swished beneath the gym's fluorescent glow. Time slowed, then sped up as feet shuffled and bodies twirled, every jitterbug step a declaration of youth and freedom on that crowded, echoing floor. The moment your hands met felt like the biggest secret between you two, a gentle rebellion against homework and early bedtimes. The sock hop wasn't just a dance. It was where friendships ignited and first crushes blossomed, fueled by ice cream sodas and the thrill of music that wouldn't let you sit still. And just like that, the next slow song started spinning on the jukebox, pulling you back in, feet itching to move, hands reaching again. The moment your car pulled into a gas station in the 40s or 50s, you already knew you were in for something special. No fumbling with pumps yourself. Instead, a crisp, uniformed attendant greeted you with a friendly nod, ready to take over. His white jacket, sometimes emblazoned with the service brand's logo, looked spotless against the gleaming chrome of your beloved sedan. Before you even opened the door, he was at your side, pumping gas, oil can in hand to check the engine's lifeblood, and a rag at the ready for that ritual windshield wipe. You could almost hear the soft swish of squeegees and smell that distinct mix of gasoline and motor oil mingling in the summer air. These weren't just tasks, they were acts of care, performed with practiced politeness and a reassuring smile. Inside, other attendants nodded to passing drivers, exchanging small talk about the weather, the latest town news, or the condition of your car. These stops weren't mere pit stops. They were town rituals, little breaks in the daily grind where your car was pampered and your day briefly brightened by warm human connection. And if you tried to tip, there was always a quiet refusal, a "no, thank you, sir," with pride in the standards of service. This full-service culture was a handshake between machine and man, community and convenience, one that vanished as self-service pumps took over decades later, along with those easy roadside chats. But on the rare days you'd pass by a full-service station, still clinging to tradition, uniforms gleaming, hoses ready, service respectful, you'd catch that nostalgic wave of how gasoline was once more than fuel, a neighborhood handshake as your windshield got shinier and your tank fuller. Next, the eagerly awaited jingle of a neighborhood soda fountain beckons, where fizzy treats chilled more than just the summer heat. Your fridge door wasn't just a cold steel slab. It was the family's beating heart, plastered with a lively cluster of magnets, holding everything important in its magnetic grip. Those curved doors, whether painted avocado green or classic white, displayed an array of magnetic souvenirs. Tiny advertisements from favorite brands like Campbell's Soup and Coca-Cola, miniature calendars you flipped monthly, and worn grocery lists scribbled in hurried handwriting. The ink smudged in places where little hands had traced over the words, reminders to pick up bread, milk, or maybe a tot of Miracle Whip. This was your family's command center, an organized chaos that only made sense inside your kitchen. There were magnets shaped like fruits, quirky cartoon characters, glued-on plastic 3D logos from 7-Up or the local hardware store, each one a tiny snapshot of a moment, a vacation stop, or a handed-down souvenir from Aunt Edna. Over time, faded notes curled at the edges, reminders about the school bake sale or a doctor's appointment written on pastel-colored scraps of paper torn from an old memo pad. The clang of metal on metal as you pulled off a note to update the shopping list felt like a ritual, a daily check that life was ticking along in order. Sometimes the fridge was also the spot where Dad left his sloppy-toed post-work notes for Mom. "Don't forget meatballs tonight," or "pick up the car." The scent of the kitchen mingled with the faint magnetic plastic smell, creating a sensory capsule of domestic life. Every magnet-clustered surface was a quiet testament to a household's rhythm, its small, slow unfolding. The fridge wasn't just a machine. It was a tactile memory board, a silent scheduler for everything from Sunday dinners to homework projects. And just as one note was erased or removed, there was always the next day's list to be written, the next magnet to be added, life planned one precise detail at a time. The buzzy hum of the local cinema lobby is your Saturday morning signal. The weekend's biggest event is about to unfold. Kids clutching coins, popcorn buckets already crinkling, carpeted floors sticky with last week's spills. This is where Saturday magic begins. You slip past the ticket booth, where the usher's flashlight beams cut through the dim, guiding you to your seat. Just as the lights dip low, the big screen flickers to life, and the smell hits you. Fresh buttered popcorn interlaced with that unmistakable scent of celluloid film. A cartoon burst into color first. A zany hand-drawn chase or a wacky animal caper, a brief burst of laughter and pure delight echoing through the crowded theater. Then the newsreel rolls, a black-and-white snapshot of a world still reshaping after war's shadow. Headlines flickering across the screen, voice narrating brave heroes and everyday triumphs. It's education, yet escapism, all at once. The main event comes in the form of a serial adventure, a cliffhanger hanging in the air. You're hooked on Captain Marvel or Gene Autry's Serenade, hanging onto every line of that thrilling storyline, imagining yourself as part of that heroic world where good always wins. The crackle and pop of the projector feels like a heartbeat sinking to your own. As the serial episodes spool out week after week, your ticket stub a golden pass to excitement beyond the neighborhood streets. Outside that cinema, reality waits, a world still caught in shadows. But here, in the flickering glow, you're somewhere else entirely, caught between Saturday's long-ago promise and the timeless pull of adventure. And just as the theater lights rise, you're already counting down the days to the next matinee. The word polio hung in the air like a silent menace. Parents clutched their children tighter, eyes scanning every cough, every sneeze, like it might be the start of something terrible. You remember the chilling images, rows of iron lungs humming, those massive metal tubes where brave kids lay trapped, their chests rising and falling not by their own breath, but by the machine's relentless rhythm. The hospital wards were makeshift fortresses, sounds of pneumatic suction and ventilators echoing stark warnings, radio broadcasts interrupted by cautionary tales urging quarantine and cleanliness like a whispered prayer for survival. Germ warfare wasn't some abstract science. It was your playground reality. Handshakes were suspect, playground swings sanitized when no one was looking, and birthday parties the ultimate gamble. Your mother's relentless hand-washing ritual, your father's grim face when you complained of a sore throat, all part of the daily anxiety shadowing your childhood. Every cough from a classmate sparked a ripple of dread, every whispered report of a case nearby turning your neighborhood into a war zone of invisible enemy agents. The iron lung became a horrifying emblem of helplessness and hope intertwined, a machine that kept children caught between life and the cold steel embrace of illness. Yet, beneath the fear was fierce determination. The race for a vaccine was a desperate, hopeful sprint that would one day snap this invisible threat. Until then, childhood was a cautious dance, avoiding crowds, scrubbing hands raw, and living with that quiet pulse of worry beneath every game and every innocent laugh. And in this conditioned caution, life kept moving. Because Even in the shadow of iron lungs, childhood found ways to dream. The shrill ring of the party line sliced through quiet afternoons, a signal not just for your family, but for several neighbors who shared the same precious telephone connection. Each ring was a communal alarm, drawing everyone's attention as if the whole block might pick up the receiver at once. You lifted your end of the black Bakelite phone cord, the heavy, familiar receiver pressing against your ear, knowing your call was never truly private. Voices overlapped, conversations tangled, sometimes unexpectedly. Aunt Mabel might be mid-gossip about Mrs. Johnson's new garden gnome while your dad argued pricing at the hardware store. The line crackled with static and stray words, the unseen neighbor's presence threading through every syllable. Attempts at privacy were delicate dances, quick whispers refraining from sensitive topics, or hanging up at the first bark of a neighbor's voice. Kids learned early to switch off their burst of laughter or secrets when the party line rang out, aware mouths were never closed tight enough. And yet, it was this shared telephone cord that stitched the neighborhood's social fabric tighter. A pulse of gossip, urgency, and connection, all delivered by that sharp ring. When your call finally ended, the line was immediately open for another family to grab the receiver, uninterrupted, their voices tumbling into yours like an ongoing neighborhood play. This was a time when telephone privacy was a luxury, and every odd interruption was a reminder of how connected you truly were. Neighbors living a chorus of daily life, bound by the cord, whispering stories that floated just a few wires away. From shared lines to shared secrets, you moved next to the glowing world of 8mm home movies, where memories were recorded forever in flickering frames. That first glide of smooth nylon against your skin like running silk over your calves was pure magic after years of rationing and makeshift fabrics. The post-war return of nylon stockings wasn't just about fashion. It was a sparkling symbol of freedom and femininity. Suddenly, legs shimmered like never before, clad in sheer, shimmering socks that caught the light with every step. Before the war, nylon had dazzled as the miracle fiber. But during those tense years, genuine stockings were nearly impossible to find. Women improvised with cotton, wool, even painted legs, dreaming of the day their wardrobes could dance in shine again. When factories switched back to nylons, racks at department stores became treasure troves. Boxes like those from Kieser and Belle Charmier invited you to slip into a world of gossamer elegance. You'd wiggle into the hose, carefully pulling up the fabric, making sure no snag or run spoiled the flawless finish. The subtle sheen paired perfectly with tailored skirts and polished shoes, giving every outing a freshly minted confidence boost. Maybe you'd hear the faint rush of nylon fabric as an echo of newfound optimism, a reminder that life could sparkle again, even after the darkest years. The sensation was almost electric, the stocking's whisper-soft touch, a small luxury that made public gatherings and everyday errands feel special. Housewives and working women alike shared knowing smiles, their legs a quiet celebration of resilience and renewal. Not just cosmetics, the stockings wove together threads of hope, femininity, and effortlessly transforming a daily routine into an elegant ritual. Even the swish of a skirt in the wind seemed enhanced, a soft call to notice the shimmering dance of nylon, to embrace the era's optimistic rhythm. The glory days of post-war stockings shimmered briefly but brilliantly, stepping aside only as pantyhose and new fashions marched in, not without a little nostalgic sigh. The factory hums like a giant, endless beast, alive through the night. Grease scenes mark your uniform, the badge of honor for the midnight crew. The clatter of assembly lines pounds through the cavernous buildings, planes, tanks, artillery bits, meticulously crafted under harsh tungsten lamps. Your hands clang metal and twist wires with a practiced rhythm, eyes half clouded with fatigue, but sharp enough to catch any flaw that might compromise the war effort. Between tasks, chuckles break the heavy monotony. Old jokes, worn and retold, bounce off the concrete walls. Cards appear, a makeshift deck salvaged from a tattered box. And suddenly, you're not just workers, you're comrades in the swing-shift trenches. Time seems to bend, hours slipping by as cigarette smoke curls lazily in the stale air of the break room. Outside, the world feels distant, quieter, while inside, the clang and clatter blend into a strange, comforting chorus. You share a flask passed hand to hand, warming bitter coffee taken from dented thermoses. The camaraderie is a shield against the exhaustion that creeps like a shadow into every bone. Machines groan and hum, and for a moment the worries of rationing, air raids, and war news fade, replaced by the chatter of shared stories and the endless shuffle of cards. When the morning light seeps through grimy windows, it's time to punch out, shed the grease-stained uniform, and return to the world above. But the bond stays, stitched into the fabric of those sweat-soaked night shifts, ready to be recalled in fleeting smiles during the day. Next, the ritual of morning cartoons that greeted daytime kids wouldn't keep you. They were the secret world your siblings inhabited. The clang of a metal bell on a sticky summer morning could only mean one thing: the Iceman was coming. You'd hear that distinct jingle echo down the street, and your heart would race just a little, because ice blocks weren't just cold cubes. They were the lifeline of every home's coolness before electric refrigerators took over. Outside, the wooden icebox sat proud on its legs, like a big clunky cabinet with a thick, insulated door. Inside, a cavern ready to cradle a stolid block of ice. When the Iceman arrived, he'd heft one of these heavy crystalline slabs, sometimes wrapped in burlap, onto the kitchen floor. The crackling sound as he used the ice pick to chip off cubes was almost musical. Those chips went straight into the little metal tray for freezing water or chilling lemonade. Meanwhile, the slow drip of melting ice pooled quietly in the drip pan, a constant reminder that this wasn't just cold storage. It was a daily ritual. Opening the icebox door, you'd be greeted by that clean, wet chill that seemed cooler than any modern fridge could manage. Butter, milk, leftovers, all wrapped neatly on shelves, cooled by the block's presence. You had to remember to keep the door shut tight, because every crack let warmth rush in fast, and the end of the day meant hauling out the wet burlap and wiping down the dripping wood. Not glamorous, but grounding. Now, the Iceman was a fixture in every neighborhood, often a cheerful, bundled-up figure, juggling blocks onto his cart, tossing jokes as he went, leaving behind a cold little promise of summer relief. The icebox wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was a hub of cool life, dependency, and community connection. The slow melt and crackle, a soundtrack to porch talks and lemonade stands. Next, the buzz and whirl of those first electric refrigerators, silent but no less revolutionary. The warm glow from a single lamp casts dancing shadows across your living room walls, but all eyes and ears are fixed on the radio's softly crackling sound. A family gathering ritual, the evening broadcast hour. You settle in on the worn couch, your fingers tracing the rounded dials of the black Bakelite radio, its familiar hum filling the room with the life. Voices swirl through the static, actors weaving tales of intrigue, romance, and adventure. The suspense of detective stories like The Shadow or Dragnet pulls you in, your imagination painting scenes far beyond the modest furnishings around you. Meanwhile, soap operas spool out daily dramas, heartbreak, betrayal, love affairs that stretched over months of episodes. Ma Perkins, Guiding Light, voices so vivid they feel like old friends sharing secrets in the dark. No flashy screens here, just sound waves carrying emotion, laughter, gasps. Your dad's chair creaks as he leans forward, hanging on every word. Your mom's knitting pauses mid-stitch. Even the youngest hush caught up in the narrative thread. Commercial breaks break the spell briefly. Buzzy jingles for Ovaltine or Lucky Strike cigarettes, then back into the drama. Cliffhangers teasing next week's fate. Radio was the Netflix of its time, communal and intimate, sparking imaginations and family conversations. Tuning in after dinner, you became part of an unseen world, carried by voices and sound effects, a shared secret in twilight's hush. This simple ritual bridged distances and generations, a warm pulse beating through cold and quiet nights. And just as you reach for the dial to catch the next mystery, the clatter of fading static signals a new program starting, ushering you onward through the evenings of yesteryear. Handwriting a letter to a soldier overseas was an act of hope wrapped in paper. The creak of your pen across thin-lined stationery felt urgent, like sending a piece of your heartbeat across an ocean. Every word mattered. Dear John, stay safe, I miss you. Each folded line a whispered promise. Pasted pressed flowers from your backyard, bent petals carefully arranged in the margins, turned plain sheet into a delicate keepsake. It wasn't just a letter. It was a fragile container for love and longing. Stamped envelopes sat ready on the corner of your desk, the bright red 6 Cyan stamp, a tiny emblem of connection, affixed with care to avoid smudging the ink. You traced your return address meticulously, practicing splendid loops and curls to ensure clarity and a personal touch. Collecting stamps wasn't just a hobby. It was a tactile link to the wider world, a way to partake in the journey of your words. Each envelope was a wing in the vast postal network, soaring over noisy seas to a soldier's weathered hands. The scent of fresh paper mingled with faint traces of lilac soap and summer grass, carrying memories as deeply as the pen scratched on the page. Mended friendships and quiet confessions nestled beside shared hopes for the future, sealed tight beneath a well-moistened flap. Sometimes there'd be a pressed daisy or a hastily drawn heart in colored pencil, a fragile treasure for lonely evenings under foreign stars. Writing was a ritual, the steady ticking of the clock, the rhythmic scratch of pen nib, the gentle crease of folding. And then, after all the waiting, came the hopeful, breathless thrill when a response arrived, yellowed pages swelling with the stamina of a faraway voice. The letter was a lifeline, a bridge across oceans. Next, the clink of penny candy jars called out, Small comforts in uncertain times. You've just arrived at your friend's house for a weekend sleepover. Tonight's main event, the gigantic blow-up air mattress in the living room. The thing is nearly as big as the floor itself. A rubbery beast ready for you and 3 others to crash on. The vinyl surface gleams under the overhead light, promising the ultimate bounce and comfort, or so you hope. Inflation is a group exercise, half laughter, half huffing into that little plastic tube. You take turns pushing air in, cheeks puffed, until it's almost too big for the space. But here comes the first hiccup. Someone's shoe has a tiny pinhole, or maybe the valve wasn't sealed tight enough. The mattress sighs quietly, deflating just enough to wiggle awkwardly with every shift. Settling in, you clutch that thin, plasticky blanket. It crinkles softly in the low light. The sound of the night outside is muted as you're suspended just inches from the living room carpet. Senses heightened because you're not in a bed. Every small noise, the mattress creaking, a stifled giggle from the edge, the rumble as someone shifts weight, feels magnified. By midnight, the slow leak turns the mattress bottomless, sagging like a tired boat. You end up clustered together on a smaller ridge of air, bodies bumping and intertwining beneath shared scratchy blankets. The awkwardness is part of the charm, the cramped space, the whispered secrets escaping with every pop and groan of the mattress. There's no better proof of friendship than this, the cold, the bounces, the plastic scent mixing with pop-top soda cans on the floor. Eventually, a sleeping heap forming, the mattress deflates so much, someone groans and pokes it upright, only to have it sigh and win back a little air, as if promising another night of clumsy adventure. And just like that, your grown-up bedtime turns into a memory wrapped in vinyl and adventure. There's a distinct swish that defines mornings and afternoons in countless homes back then, the soft rustle of a housecoat. You remember those button-up robes, not quite dresses, not quite pajamas. They were everywhere. Floral prints blooming in pastel blues and pinks, sometimes in bold checks or polka dots, each one a declaration of domestic readiness. Put one on, and instantly the world shifts. It's warm and cozy, a layer of comfort that softens the day's chores. Ironing a crisply starched shirt, watching the kettle whistle, or coaxing a baby through bath time. The fabric folds just right as your hands move, the buttons secure but easy to undo, for a quick sip of lemonade on the porch. Speaking of porch, that's where the housecoat shines outside its domestic duties, the casual armor for quick chats with a neighbor or waving to the mailman across the street. You'd crease a knowing smile, tug down the collar, adjust the belt slightly. It's practical and presentable. No need for fussing over a full change of clothes when life demands multitasking, a baby crying in one room, the phone ringing in another. And there's something about the scent of those housecoats, mild detergent mingled with last night's cooking, a trace of freshly ironed cotton or rayon blend, a hint of perfume dabbed behind the ear. They carry the symphony of daily routine, children's laughter, the ticking clock, the distant hum of a vacuum. The housecoat invites you in and keeps you ready to step out, bridging the private and public with a simple clasp of a button. Just before the day slips into evening, it folds away softly, waiting for tomorrow's next performance. The next thing you'll notice echoes a different kind of domestic sound. The rhythmic clatter of the icebox door opening and closing. There's a peculiar rhythm, to dialing a rotary phone that you never quite appreciate until it's gone. Your finger finds a number cutout, then presses in, feeling the smooth curvature of the plastic dial. You turn it clockwise, hearing that satisfying series of clicks with each step, click, 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 slowly winding the dial until it reaches the metal stopper. Then you release, waiting as the dial practically hums its way back to the starting position, counting the beats of your patience. Each number mattered, measured by these mechanical clicks, not the instant bursts we've come to expect today. It was a test of precision and rhythm. One slip and you'd have to start over. Dialing a family's number felt like a secret handshake, an unspoken code of connection wrapped up in this tactile ritual. You could almost hear the operator's footsteps on the other end for "operator, please," that familiar backup plan when you didn't know the number or needed help. Kids learned to send the dial just right, practicing the swing's arc and speed, fast enough to move, but slow enough not to break the mechanism. And the phone's heavy handset, with its thick braided cord, was part of this slow dance, a mechanical link to voices miles away. The rotary dial demanded patience, the tension of anticipation as you waited for the line to connect, the promise of a moment shared across wires and waves. This was communication carved out of deliberate touch, a simple pleasure in the everyday mechanics of human connection, long before the tap of a screen or the beep of a keypad. And as you lifted the receiver to your ear, that slow, mechanical return was the prelude to something about to happen. Someone on the other end, a story waiting to be told. Sunday mornings began with a crisp ritual unseen in today's casual world. Your polished shoes gleamed under the kitchen light, gleaming black or soft white, each scuff painstakingly removed the night before. The aroma of starch filled the air as your mom pulled out the ironing board, smoothing starched collars until they stood proud and stiff. Shirts whispered with that satisfying crackle as cuffs were buttoned with meticulous care. Gloves, white, delicate, and sometimes just a little too snug, slipped over small hands, completing the ensemble. Hats were the crown jewels, felt for the grown-ups, wide-brimmed and trimmed for the ladies, neat caps or straw for the boys, a gentle tightening of ribbons, a last check in the hallway mirror, and the family lined up like a well-rehearsed pageant team. This wasn't just dressing up. It was a performance of dignity. Politeness was sewn into every hem and fold. You learned early on not to wrinkle your skirt, never to scuff your shoes on the church steps. The Sunday best was a sacred armor against the ordinary, a public statement that this was a day of respect for God, your community, and yourself. Your dad adjusted his tie again, a quick tug to ensure it was just so, while your mother gave the occasional tug at your sleeve, a silent reminder to stand tall and speak softly. In those heavy layered clothes and carefully set hairstyles, there was a quiet kind of pride. You weren't just showing off your finest threads. You were wearing tradition, a shared family language of reverence. The walk to church was a procession, footsteps echoing on the pavement in neat rhythm, punctuated by the clink of gloves and the rustle of fabric. It was an unspoken promise. Sunday was special, and you belonged to something bigger. And so, in the glow of street lamps fading into morning light, the Sunday best stepped out the door, straight into a world waiting to be admired. The clink of glass bottles on wooden porches was the dawn soundtrack of countless neighborhoods. Before the sun had fully risen, a familiar figure rolled up, the milkman. His honey wagon, the old milk truck with its creaky suspension and racks full of heavy glass bottles, came rumbling down quiet streets. You heard the gentle tap-tap of bottles slipping into those wire holders, the careful placement punctuated by the subtle jingle of coins left behind in the metal milk box. The milk? Always so fresh, chilled by the early morning air and wrapped in a thin layer of dew. It tasted like a secret luxury. Not the lukewarm stuff from a store aisle, but pure, creamy milk that somehow felt like a gift from the earth to your doorstep each day. You could hear the faint rustle of paper caps peeling off the bottles, that satisfying crack of cold glass meeting cold lips. It made cereal taste better, cookies dunked richer, and hot cocoa an event. Families had their rituals around milk delivery. Small, crumpled notes left in the box with special requests, a favorite deliveryman named and greeted with a wave. Older folks treasured the once or twice a week cream jars, thick enough to spoon off, a little indulgence in your morning coffee. Kids watched eagerly from windows, hoping for the occasional chocolate milk treat or a quick hello. The milkman's visit was more than a delivery. It was a daily connection, a nod to simpler, touchable routines. And just like that, the milk truck rolled on to the next house, leaving behind the sucked, clinking echo of an age when freshness was a doorstep away. The smell of newspaper ink and fresh inked linotypes on the morning paper awaited just beyond the glass door. The faint clack and whirl of the hand-crank churn tugged you outside, where summer air mingled with the scent of fresh cream. In the backyard, a wooden barrel-shaped churn sat steady on the grass, its paddles ready to rhythmically slice through the thick cream. You pressed your small hands against the metal handle, feeling the cool buzz as you began to turn, slow at first, then faster, the swish and slap echoing like a secret song of generations past. Butter wasn't just whipped up in a factory, it was coaxed out of cream with patience, muscle, and tradition. The cream came fresh, separated from milk that morning, a pale golden promise, rich and faintly sweet. Every swirl brought you closer to transformation from liquid to solid, a sensory ritual you participated in with glee and focus. Your arms ached, but the repetitive motion of that wooden churn had an almost meditative quality, a tactile beat linking your hands to those of your mother, your grandmother, who showed you how to know when the butter was ready, when lumps formed and the sound changed, softer and more song-like. The air around you was alive, the low hum of cicadas, the distant chatter of neighborhood kids, and the sharp splash of cool water as the butter was washed free from buttermilk, patted dry on a cloth. You could almost taste that fresh, creamy butter, packed thick on warm bread, freshly churned and kissed by the sun. The backyard churn wasn't just a tool, it was a vessel for patience, family stories, and a strong sense that making food was a craft, a gift born from your own hands. And with each turn of that paddle, you grew part of something deeply rooted and delightfully simple. Next, a cooling glass bottle with a wax-sealed top waits for your curious fingers to crack it open. Clang! The unmistakable sound of a metal lunchbox hitting the classroom desk, a midday ritual that etched itself into any kid's school day from the 50s through the 70s. These weren't flimsy plastic carriers. They were sturdy steel boxes, often adorned with brightly colored images of your favorite cartoon heroes. Batman's masked glare, Superman's iconic S, or a song from the Pink Panther. Each metal lunchbox was more than just a container. It was a badge of identity, a like-minded signal to your peers during the lunch bell. Inside, nestled among wax paper and paper napkins, lay a thermos flask packed with steaming tomato soup or chocolate milk rattling alongside the sandwich. Peanut butter and jelly was king inside these lunch boxes, thick, sometimes oozing out just so when you took a bite, while slices of apple or maybe a hard-boiled egg hid in a corner, waiting to be discovered. Opening that lunch box was like unwrapping a little treasure chest. The aroma of fresh bread, peanut butter, and sometimes a homemade cookie promised a brief escape from the hustle of the schoolyard. The metal clink was usually echoed by a half-whisper, half-brag, "Check out my Spider-Man," or "I got Popeye this week." The images faded, but the dents and scratches proudly declared its time in your hands. The battles and friendships cemented during recess and lunch hour. In those moments, your lunch pail wasn't just functional, it was a social currency, a reflection of who you were, or wanted to be, when the bell rang. And just as the lunchroom buzzed with chatter, the lunchbox snapped shut. You slung your satchel over your shoulder and dashed back outside, to the world waiting beyond the cafeteria walls. The evening air would settle into a calm hush, punctuated only by the soft flicker of a kerosene lamp's flame. In many rural homes where electricity hadn't fully arrived, these lamps were more than just light sources. They were lifelines to the evening. The glass chimney glowed warmly, its soft golden light casting playful, dancing shadows across wooden walls and carefully stacked shelves. You'd see the subtle sway of the flame, alive with a life of its own, as a gentle breeze slipped through a cracked window or the door opened with a creak. That distinctive kerosene scent, a mix of faint soot and sweet oil, filled the room with an earthy smell that was strangely comforting. You'd breathe it in with your chores, stirring dinner pots, sewing under a dim halo, or sorting through farm tools. The smell itself told stories of late nights spent reading by lamplight, whispered conversations, and families huddled together waiting for the power lines to come. The lamp's glow was a friend to evening tasks and a beacon for quiet reflection. It made every moment slower, heavier, as if time itself had softened around the flame's edges. And when the wick needed trimming, a small, delicate art, you learned patience, knowing a perfect burn meant less smoke and a steadier glow. The lamp wasn't just about light. It was warmth, atmosphere, and a connection to a living rhythm, a simpler, steadier life. As that flicker faded out and the night deepened, the world seemed to pause, waiting for dawn and a new day when electricity might finally reach that small corner of the countryside. The moment you pulled on a navy pea coat, something changed. Thick wool, heavy and scratchy against your neck, but somehow comforting, a shield from bitter wind and early winter snow. The double-breasted front with those oversized black buttons? Practical, yes, but also unmistakably military. You weren't just wearing a coat, you were carrying a piece of the war, a symbol of sacrifice stitched into everyday life. Pair the pea coat with leather boots, sturdy, scuffed, and maybe still carrying that faint smell of oil and leather conditioner from the military surplus store. Those boots weren't for fashion shows. They gripped cracked sidewalks and muddy fields alike, grounding you in a blend of utility and toughness. Walking in them connected you silently to the countless servicemen who had worn similar pairs far from home. Military surplus shops were treasure troves of authenticity. You'd find worn canvas bags, brass buckles, olive drab field jackets, but the pea coat and our boots stood out, a rugged style statement rooted in history. These items weren't just warm clothes, they were badges of resilience, badges that subtly broadcasted cultural pride and respect for wartime sacrifices. Wearing them meant you understood grit, endurance, and the shared stories of victory and survival. Kids on the block might have chased each other in denim and varsity jackets, but the pea coat and boots carried a different weight, both literally and figuratively. They spoke to a lineage of honor, a nod to duty done, and a daily reminder woven into fabric and leather that the war's echoes were part of home life too. So you zipped up that coat, tightened the laces of those boots, and stepped out, feeling both the chill of the air and the unspoken bond to a broader history. A style born from sacrifice, worn by everyday heroes long after the battles had ended. Nothing set a 1950s or 60s dinner table quite like a Jell-O salad, translucent, brightly colored gelatin, shimmering under the dining room light, wobbly and proud in its molded glory. It wasn't dessert, it was part of the main course's entourage, an edible centerpiece. The secret was in the mix. Cubes of pineapple, bits of celery, miniature marshmallows, or even grated carrots suspended like jewels inside. The spoon barely touched the mold before laugh bubbled up, watching it jiggle with every nudge, defying gravity and seriousness in equal measure. Making these salads was a ritual for homemakers nationwide. The instant gelatin packet promised convenience, but the final product was all about showmanship. You poured, stirred, and chilled, waiting impatiently for the fridge's magic. Then came the unveiling, flinging the mold onto a plate with a satisfying plop to release it, the edges shining and the fruit peeking through like a sweet, savory gem. Families crowded around, forks poised, sometimes hesitating at the weird but intriguing taste combos. Could celery really belong in something that jiggles sweetly? Somehow it did, and it worked. Jell-O salad was more than just food, it was a playful symbol of post-war optimism. Bright, affordable, modern, and fun, it embodied a decade spirit of experimentation in the kitchen. At potlucks and holiday dinners, these molded salads sparked conversation and smiles rather than the usual solemn nods of approval. For kids, it was like eating science with flavor, a mystery challenge on your plate. For adults, it was a proud nod to innovation and a splash of color in their carefully curated dining rooms. As the spoon scooped another wobbly bite, the room was filled with laughter, a momentary escape from the day's grind, suspended in shimmering, jiggling joy that only a well-made Jell-O salad could provide. There's something iconic about the pencil tucked behind a teacher's ear, a signal that strictness and kindness live side by side. Walk into any dusty classroom from the 1950s through the 70s, and you'd spot this silent badge of authority hovering just above the brow. The pencil wasn't just stationery. It was a tool for shaping childhood with a snap of chalk on slate and the occasional red ink underlining a misspelling word. The teacher's fingers, perpetually smudged with chalk dust, danced a familiar rhythm, dusting the blackboard clean, scratching small letters and numbers across the surface. When she paused, that pencil slipped smoothly behind her ear, poised to correct, guide, or quietly take notes as the day rolled on. You'd hear her voice before seeing her face, a firm timbre that carried lessons clearly, gently, but decidedly. "Sit up straight," she might say, tapping the chalkboard with a stern knuckle. But that same voice softened with a smile when a child got the answer right or when recess bell was near. Though discipline was the order of the day, there was warmth, too, wrapped in a sensible cardigan and the faint scent of talcum powder or floral soap. You could guess she was the kind of teacher who'd stay late helping with reading or patch scraped knees after recess, pencil still ready behind that ear, watchful but caring. The sight of that pencil became shorthand for a chapter of growing up, where lessons were both learned and remembered with a grateful heart, chalk dust and all. And as you moved out of her classroom, the echo of her firm but fair authority followed you, steady as that pencil tucked behind her ear. From classroom walls to the schoolyard whistle, the next forgotten thing waits just around the corner. The lunchroom buzz was punctuated by the clatter of metal trays sliding along formica tables balanced precariously between elbows and eager fingers. In every mess hall or school canteen from the 1940s through the 1960s, the cookie tray was a star player, invariably a long rectangular aluminum affair gleaming under flickering fluorescent lights, rows upon rows of golden brown cookies just pulled from the oven or tray-heated, waited patiently for their moment. Slightly crisp at the edges, but soft in the center, they gave off that unmistakable scent of warm sugar and butter, the kind that instantly banished any dreary mood. These modest treats were sometimes little too sweet, even for those with a sweet tooth. But paired with the thick, creamy milk served in glass or metal cups, they brought a joyful rhythm to the midday break. You could always spot the usual cookie types: chocolate chip, oatmeal raisin, snickerdoodles dusted with cinnamon sugar, or the occasionally decadent peanut butter with its crisscross fork marks. Kids and soldiers alike reached for their favorites, trying not to spill the milk or crumble the precious cookie, as they found a spot among friends, filing the air with laughter, secret plans, and playground chatter. There was a special skill to balancing the tray. Enough room left for the main meal, but with that coveted slot reserved for the cookie selection. The humble cookie tray was more than just a lesion of calories. It was a brief, sweet escape from routine, a moment of comfort and camaraderie amid the march of daily life. And as glances shifted toward the towering stack of trays awaiting their turn, the cookie bearer clutched their prize like a champion preparing for the playground's next great adventure, because that was the real treat waiting just beyond the mess hall doors. You hear it before you see it, the rhythmic clatter of bicycle wheels on pavement, that familiar scrape of pedals pushing fast down the street. It's early morning light slanting through leaves, and the eager paper boy is already making his rounds, hollering his singular call, "Extra! Extra! Read all about it!" The sound carries a mix of urgency and promise, mixing with the scent of dew and fresh-cut grass. You poke your head out the window just as the bike swerves onto your block, tires skimming the sidewalk edge. The kid's hair is tousled, cheeks flushed from the Riley ride, and his knapsack overflows with rolled newspapers, the Times, the Herald, or your local afternoon sheet. The paperboy's voice isn't just announcing headlines. It's signaling the day's communal pulse, bridging your quiet home to the bustling world beyond. The rustle of newsprint, the slap of papers landing crisply on porches, and the flapping corners in the breeze, they're all part of the ritual. The comics are tucked in seed like little treasures, the yellowed funnies promising moments of laughter after breakfast. This delivery was more than just errands. It was a responsibility bestowed on the neighborhood's youth, a badge earned by memorizing routes and showing up rain or shine. Parents nodded approvingly as the boy wheeled past, and neighbors exchanged greetings, strengthening bonds through this simple act. For kids, it was also a first taste of independence and trust. Navigating streets alone, handling cash, facing down barking dogs, and managing early morning grogginess just to bring news to doorsteps. The paperboy's call faded down the street, mingling with the morning birdsong and the distant honk of a car starting up for the day. That rapid cadence of wheels would soon be replaced by the quiet turn of newspaper pages into coons. As families gathered the news and comics, the world delivered daily, riding on two wheels. Evenings hummed with a special kind of magic, where the flicker of a warm amber dial drew every eye in the room. The family radio, a polished wooden cabinet with rounded edges and soft glowing tubes inside, cast a golden halo that lit faces with a cozy, almost sacred glow. Wrapped in thick knitted blankets, you'd settle into the living room knot, your parents, maybe a sibling or two, all poised around that single source of light and sound. The crackle of static was a familiar prelude, soon replaced by the booming voice of the announcer or the lilting notes of a big band tune. The Jack Benny program, Fibber McGee and Molly, or Lux Radio Theater transported everyone to worlds spun entirely from sound waves and imagination. Your dad might tap his foot during a jazzy interlude, while your mom hummed along to sentimental ballads, the radio's chatter blending into the room's heartbeat. News from overseas filtered in too, connecting your family to a larger world, stamping each moment with post-war hopes and the rhythms of everyday resilience. The aroma of fresh popcorn or a pot of tea often mingled with the radio's warmth, creating an atmosphere that made the outside world melt away. Conversations sparked between programs, laughter echoed during comedy skits, and the silence between songs was just as rich, pregnant with shared anticipation. This nightly ritual didn't just fill the evening hours. It wove a tight fabric of connection, a quiet conversation stitched in sound and shadow. Long after the dial was turned off, the sense of togetherness hummed softly in the heart, a glowing ember of simpler times. And just like that, the next memory flickers to life, waiting in the soft buzz of the evening stillness.